The Fitterist Show with your host, Christopher Allen, where we explore the art of mind and body conditioning. This week, we look at 3 news headlines from the past week from the nutrition, health, and wellness arena. And this week, we have some interesting articles. First, we take a look at the current presidential diet, in quotes, and some of the challenges with the commander-in-chief's food choices and overall nutrition consumption. Next, we check out some of the survey research on the ability to reduce the risk of cancer through diet and nutrition, and the link between food beliefs and diet choices. And finally, there's a new research study that examines the chronic lack of sleep among American children as early school start times, screen-related distractions, and other external pressures impact nightly sleep durations. Let's jump into our first news story. Our first news story is fascinating. It's about the President of the United States and his diet. So President Donald Trump is not the healthiest of eaters. You don't have to be a detective or an investigative journalist to figure this out. The president often posts photos of himself eating fast food meals aboard his private jet or Air Force One, or as he's traveling around the country. Just for context, last year Trump's weight was just about 240 pounds with a BMI of 29.9, which is interesting in that a BMI, which is body mass index, a BMI of 30 and above is indicative of obesity. So Trump was suspiciously measured at 29.9. So technically, he is classified as overweight and on the verge of obese, but not quite obese. So let's look at some of this in a little more detail. According to the Let Trump Be Trump book, which was published recently, Trump's go-to meal from McDonald's includes 2 Big Macs, 2 Filet-O-Fish, and a chocolate shake. Breaking that down a little bit, 1 Big Mac's about 540 calories, so he's doubled that to 1,080. 2 Filet-O-Fish is another 780 calories, and the chocolate shake, another 530. So his caloric intake from his go-to fast food meal at McDonald's is just about 2,400 calories. Now, to put that in context, the average person eats roughly about 2,000 calories a day. So he's already exceeded the caloric intake from one average person's daily intake in one meal. And we'll talk about this more later, but throughout the day, he also drinks up to 12 Diet Cokes a day. That's a lot of Diet Coke. So it's been reported in other news and media outlets that Trump has a recurring fear of being poisoned, which, as irrational as that may be or not, it's one reason why he justifies the consumption of an excessive amount of fast food. Now, this actually predates his move into the White House, so this is something that's been a characteristic of Donald Trump for many years. But the president also reportedly distrusts the staff that prepares his food at the White House. So I find it a bit odd that if President Trump is fearful of being poisoned by people that work for him at the White House, which is in itself odd, he consciously chooses to essentially poison himself with a barrage of unhealthy fast food and unhealthy foods on a regular basis. I'm just saying, look, if I had a personal chef 24/7 that could make healthy dishes that were unbelievably tasty, I'd be leveraging the hell out of that on-demand food service. If you ever see a movie called The Contender with Jeff Bridges and Joan Allen, check it out. There's some great scenes in the movie where Jeff Bridges, who plays the President of the United States, picks up the phone and starts ordering weird dishes from his personal chef, trying to stump him with a dish that he's unable to prepare, and he's unsuccessful throughout the movie. But some great scenes in the movie The Contender. By the way, it's a great movie. I really liked it. Joan Allen, Jeff Bridges, The Contender. Check it out. Sorry for the sidebar, but it was worth mentioning. So back to the point of this irrational fear of being poisoned and this general paranoia tendency that Trump has. You've got a personal executive chef that is best in class. So he's clearly competent, clearly knows what he's doing. Yet Trump believes that in his paranoia that there is still a non-trivial risk, apparently, of being poisoned by somewhere along the food chain from being prepared to his consumption. Trump is also a huge fan of ice cream. So when he has dinners at the White House, the waiters automatically know to give him double the amount that his dinner guests receive. So this is according to Time magazine. He gets 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream with his chocolate cream pie instead of a single scoop, which is on everyone else's plate, which is kind of interesting, right? It could be a, hey, I get more than you, I'm the most important person in the room. I don't know. In addition to that, the diet continues. He reportedly consumes about a dozen Diet Cokes per day. And this is from the New York Times. Now, while diet soda may seem like a smarter choice over its regular soda counterpart, it may really not be. We talked about this in the previous episode of the Fitterist Show, where we talked about artificially sweetened diet drinks where they have synthetic sweeteners. This one in Diet Coke called aspartame, which mimics sugar but doesn't deliver the sugar payload and thus causes more cravings for actual sugar. Some more details on Trump's diet. Many times he will skip breakfast, says he oftentimes skips breakfast, this is according to People magazine. And when he does choose to eat breakfast, he opts for bacon and eggs that are, of course, well done. He likes well done steaks, well done eggs. While there are opinions on whether eating breakfast or choosing to fast is the healthier route, one thing is for certain that when you start to eat, breakfast does kickstart your metabolism in the morning and can start to help regulate your blood sugar levels after hours of fasting. Trump's also a self-admitted germaphobe, so I'm not sure how he makes this link, but he reportedly, as a result, eats primarily prepackaged snacks like chips and Oreos, particularly on flights. And he's also commented on the cleanliness of fast food restaurants as a draw, which is interesting because most people would conjecture that his affinity for fast food restaurants probably goes beyond this is a clean place to eat, especially with the amount of calories from fast food that he consumes on a regular basis. So for someone that's got a generally unhealthful lifestyle, his choice of fast food, especially in this day and age where we know, you watch a documentary movie like Super Size Me, we know generally what a consistent diet of fast food can do to the human body and the levels of toxicity in the liver and other organs that can impact it. So in this day and age of that awareness, it's just odd that the most powerful person in the world chooses kind of a self-destructive characteristic of pursuing fast food. He could clearly pursue cleanliness without opting for fast food. There are other restaurants that serve healthy food that are also clean. Even this was cited a lot in the news, and people saw a lot of images of this when the Clemson football team won the NCAA national championship. Team was invited to the White House, and he served a buffet of fast food from McDonald's at the White House. Now, Trump kind of covered this up by saying, hey, this is a little bit of the result of the government shutdown, so we wanted to save money. But clearly, critics did not approve of the menu. There were actually, this did not get reported a lot, but there were a lot of Clemson players that just skipped the meal. Like, they know, they're smarter. They know they're eating crap. Not that it's not okay to eat it every once in a while, but not on a regular basis. I find this next point just utterly fascinating. In spite of this well-documented unhealthy diet, Trump has medical professionals who claim that he is both the healthiest president ever elected, but also as healthy as many or most professional athletes, even though he is just under the marker for what is considered obese. So clearly, this is not true. He is not at the level of cardiovascular fitness or strength and resistance training as most professional athletes. He's probably not even in the top 50%. So another instance of where the public perception just does not match reality. And what's interesting is that for most people, right, you can, rather than doing the work to achieve actual improvement, it appears that Donald Trump would rather kind of manipulate the impressions and control the messaging around his health to make it appear that he is healthy when in fact he's not, which just seems odd. But in this case, very consistent with who he is. Now look, we've had presidents that have not had perfect diets, that have had a penchant for fast food, but I don't know if we've seen quite the extreme level of fast food and poor diet and nutrition consumption than with the current president. So one question that does come up sometimes in the media is this diet suitable enough to really nourish the mental health of the president and leader of the free world? Are there any drawbacks with regard to diet and its impact on both physical and mental health? Now look, he's consuming some of the worst quality foods, which will ultimately have an effect on both his physical and mental health. The brain is highly sensitive to the quality of foods that it intakes, and it consumes a lot of the body's energy to begin with. And it is pretty much dependent on having that right macro and micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants to fuel the brain. So studies have shown that in general, with a poor diet, there is some generally impaired brain function and brain health. And there's also a potential for mood disorders such as depression and angry outbursts. Research suggests that much of this damage can be reversed, and improvement is possible if one switches to a balanced diet. But without doing so, the damage does start to accumulate over time. I found this pretty fascinating. I have to admit myself, I had seen some pictures. I saw the Clemson McDonald's buffet picture, things like that, but I didn't realize until I did the research how poor the president's diet actually is. And hopefully he'll take some steps to remedy that, particularly when you've got the resources, the quality of foods, the spices, the good carbohydrates, fresh vegetables, all that right at your fingertips, prepared for you 24/7. Come on, man, get with it. On to news story number 2. This next story is based on a recent survey by the International Food Information Council and the American Institute for Cancer Research. They particularly focused people of Generation X, which is age ranges roughly 39 to 54, and what they believe about the role of diet and lifestyle in cancer prevention, and how this then affects their choices for food. And the majority, about 60% of the people, thought that diet and lifestyle play some role, while about a third think these factors play a very large role. However, most felt that lifestyle matters more for preventing heart disease and type 2 diabetes than it does for cancer. There were a couple of misconceptions that were highlighted in the study. The first was that fewer than half of Gen Xers think that eating a healthy diet would reduce someone's risk of developing heart disease, cancer, or type 2 diabetes, when in fact they actually are large impacts on those areas. And so all of those three, heart disease, cancer, and type 2 diabetes, were less than 50% of the people thought that that was impacted by a diet. But in reality, it's much higher. Another misconception was around developing type 2 diabetes, where sugar itself is not necessarily a huge risk factor for developing type 2 diabetes. It is a factor, but in reality, reducing sugar consumption is not as important as overall lowering your body weight and overall getting regular physical activity. Again, cutting sugar can be helpful, but less impactful than lowering body mass and getting regular physical exercise. So a cancer preventative diet is rich in nutrients found in food. In fact, the American Institute for Cancer Research recommends that we don't use supplements to try and protect us against cancer, in part because our bodies absorb nutrients in their natural food state better than in isolated nutrients found in supplements or pills. To get these nutrients, we just need to eat more plant foods, more fruits, more vegetables. And the researchers remind us that it's not an all or none strategy when it comes to diet. Most people, including the Gen Xers that were targeted in this survey, don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. Now, while we should be encouraged to think, plants, fruits, vegetables first, that doesn't mean vegan, vegetarian is the only way to go. You can absolutely have red meat, steak, even on a plant-based diet. Incorporate a number of different nutrients. They also suggest, in general, to fill 2/3 of your plate with non-starchy vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and beans. That includes at least 5 servings a day of vegetables and fruits, especially colorful. Again, the brighter the vegetable, generally the higher in nutrients that it is. Eating a variety of foods offers your body's cells a broad mix of vitamins, minerals, micronutrients, fiber, all of which are natural compounds that can help protect cells from damage that could lead to cancer. What about that other part of your plate? You can fill it with animal protein. You can have meat, poultry, fish, eggs, milk, dairy, but just make sure you're choosing healthy things, lean meats, to complement the vegetables and fruits that you're also eating. So what are your things that you might want to eat less of? And they cite a few of these in the study. No big surprises here. First is processed meats, which often contain preservatives and other substances that could promote cancer. Second, avoid highly processed foods. What a surprise. And beverages that have added salt, added sugar, added fat. Again, there's a ton of sugar added in a lot of prepackaged foods in general. And those products also tend to be lower in nutrients and fiber and have the added disadvantage of being higher in calories. Third thing to avoid, refined carbohydrates, things in general like white bread, pasta, white rice. These foods are lower in fiber and nutrients. And the fourth thing that they say you might want to eat less of is alcohol. Again, it increases the risk of certain cancers, including breast cancer, colorectal cancer. Don't exceed 2 drinks a day for men, 1 drink a day for women is their general guidelines for this study. So again, not overly surprising with the recommendations and the steps you can take through diet and nutrition to potentially combat cancer. And our third and final news story. And this study comes to us from a new study that is being presented at the American Academy of Pediatrics. And the headline that researchers found was that about 52% of American children between the ages of 6 and 17 are getting less than the 9 hours of recommended sleep by pediatricians. We'll get into some of these things, but early school start times, screen-related distractions, and other external pressures have led to this. But overall, kids aren't getting enough sleep. And we talked about this in episode 11 of The Fitterist Show. You can access that at www.fitterist.com/011. But what are some of the risks of children not getting enough sleep? Well, first of all, the lack of sleep combined with a greater exposure to germs at school makes it more likely that a young person can contract the flu or get the common cold, much more easily get sick. Second risk is developmental challenges. So look, at this age, kids are still developing. They're still developing their brain, their decision-making skills, but when sleep deprivation occurs, your frontal lobe of your brain is most impaired. It can cause decision-making process to be a little bit delayed or impaired. Attention span is shortened, and memory functioning can actually decrease. Another risk is sleep-deprived kids generally have more behavioral problems, more academic problems, more health problems, more risk-taking behaviors, and more anxiety and mood-related problems. Too little sleep can increase a child's risk for health problems, high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, diabetes over time. And an interesting note that the researchers highlighted was that the risks of those that receive less than 8 hours of sleep can increase the risk for self-harm. The strongest link was between mood and self-harm, such that high school students sleeping less than 6 hours were more than 3 times as likely to report considering suicide, making a suicide attempt plan, or attempting suicide than high school students sleeping 8 hours or more. That's a little scary. Another area that the researchers highlighted, which is relatively new, is social media. And this presents a new and kind of unique challenge to a good night's sleep for kids. Companies engineer these social media applications for highly repeated usage. The dopamine hits from new posts, new images, new comments signal the brain to fire. Anytime the brain is starting to fire, it's going to make it more difficult for you to fall asleep, particularly if you're using the device late at night. Social media can also trigger the adrenal glands to secrete adrenaline and the stress hormone cortisol when a person checks their social media posts and their feeds, which again is detrimental when you're trying to fall asleep. And as good researchers should do, they offer some tips to help your kids sleep better and more consistently. And the first one, which is kind of obvious, but it was an interesting one, right? It is just having a conversation with your kid about the importance and benefits of sufficient sleep. Early and often with young children, have conversations about the value of sleep and how the body repairs itself, how valuable sleep is, to make that early impression on a children that sleep is valuable. The next thing they mention is establishing house rules by agreeing to turn off devices at least 1 hour before bedtime, leaving those devices off until after breakfast, even leaving devices outside the bedroom overnight. That way there's no temptation to go for the glowing light. Also, the researchers said never use going to bed early as a punishment or staying up late as a reward, which is consistent with their earlier finding of understanding, discussing, and stressing the importance of sleep. You also want to optimize a sleep environment for your child and teen. Quiet, dark, comfortable bedroom, comfortable mattress and pillows. Super important for helping the child get a good night's sleep. And again, the psychological design of going to bed should always be cast in a positive light. It's not, you have to go to bed now. It's, you get to go to bed. You get to recharge your entire body, your brain, your muscles, everything for maximizing your body and mind for the next day. You get to go to sleep. That's awesome. Finally, kids should have immediate curfew, and parents should try and keep screens out of a child's bedroom. That goes along with kind of the house rules, making sure that you have an optimum sleep environment that is distraction-free, particularly from social media and screens. I really like this article because it highlights kind of at an intellectual level the importance of sleep, its regenerative and restorative powers, and communicating that at an early age to children so that they look at sleep as a valuable thing and start that habit early in life. And we'll see you next week on The Fitters Show. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to The Fitters Show. You can follow us on Instagram at Fitterest Mind Body and on Twitter at Fitterest Mind. If you enjoyed this episode, please send it to a friend or subscribe to make sure you don't miss any future episodes of The Fitters Show. My name is Christopher Allen, and make it a magical day.